ठीक है सर। हो गया ना, सही है। हेलो, गुड मॉर्निंग स्टूडेंट्स। तो कैन यू लिसन टू इट? हेलो, वेटिंग फॉर अब तक ऑन नहीं हुआ है क्या? हेलो, कैन यू पीपल लिसन टू इट? या, हाय मेगा, गुड मॉर्निंग. So welcome to the next class, that is IR this week, and this class is going to be a bit faster because there are too many things that had happened past week, perhaps many of them that crossed your, that perhaps would have just passed your eyes, so I have brought them. And apart from that, there was a demand with respect to discussing Indo-Pacific, India-ASEAN relations and RCEP. I have included RCEP and India-ASEAN relations, but not Indo-Pacific, because discussion on Indo-Pacific perhaps would take more than 1 hour or even 2 hours. Okay, so that is why we shall be discussing all those topics. And as you know, our focus is on making you aware about the happenings of recent week, and in what are the questions or what type of questions you can mention those pieces of information, as well as discussing some of the specific topics in detail. So let us look at the previous week questions. I do not know whether you people practice this or not, because generally I do not get any input from your side. So the previous week question was, India's Afghanistan policy has seen a shift from idealism to pragmatism. Discuss. So its general introduction can be that with coming of Taliban in Afghanistan has created multiple challenges for India. However, we do see a shift in India's approach compared to that in India's approach in dealing with Taliban compared to what was there in late 1990s. You can give a reference to that. Okay. And what are those changes? I have noted them down. The shift from no engagement to engaging with Taliban. Previously, we all know that there was no engagement and we were backing Northern Alliance, but presently there is an engagement. Then this was our call, that Afghan led, Afghan owned and Afghan controlled. Any decision with respect to Afghanistan should be Afghan led, Afghan owned and Afghan controlled. But now we are not continuing with the same idea, but now our focus is that Afghan territory should not be used for fomenting trouble against any other nation. And then we are more focused on the rights of women and minorities. Then in last time, since we were more aligned with the Northern Alliance, so naturally humanitarian assistance, it was not there. But this time what we have done is that we are providing humanitarian assistance but without recognizing Taliban. And the fourth one is instituting TUTING. O should not be there. Delhi Regional Security Dialogue, that we have discussed in detail. Meeting of NSAs about on the issue of Afghanistan and how to handle it. Then after that, we will discuss what are the reasons for this shift. The reasons, lessons from past experience, we saw that in the past the way we had discussed, that had reduced the maneuvering space for us. So this time, rather than no engagement, we have gone for engagement with them. Then there is increase in India's profile in the region and beyond. Now we are talking about an India that is a $3 trillion economy, which talks about being the net security provider in the region. And moreover, we are also going for managing China, engaging with US and other nations. We have increased our engagements with Central Asia, Iran, West Asia. So due to all these factors, we do have a genuine stake in Afghanistan. Another factor is India's investment, which is worth $3 billion. So while writing the points, do mention all these facts. Then there is a willingness on the part of Taliban as well. There is an understanding within Taliban that India's engagement is for good, and this will give them another breathing space or another option. Because suppose Taliban remains dependent on Pakistan and China, naturally their space to maneuver will get restricted. What if China puts some stringent conditions on Taliban? In that case, they won't have any other option. But if they do have another option in the form of India, they'll be in a better position to negotiate with China. Okay. And next is India's emergence as a more confident geopolitical player. This also shows that we are now more confident in engaging with Taliban. Okay. And what are the challenges? I have not mentioned because the challenges have already been discussed in the previous class, and you can bring in points from there. Okay. I am a bit fast today. Next question. China's demand for military outpost in Pakistan indicates its expanding profile. So there are two key terms. One is expanding profile and another is geopolitical ambitions. So while discussing the answer, make subheadings from these two key terms in the question. I have said you always bring in questions, always bring in subheadings from the question only, because simply examiner will be more comfortable in connecting with your answer. They will see that, okay, these are the demands of the question and these are the areas where it has been addressed. Okay. So these will be two subheadings. And how does it create challenges for India? So third subheading would be challenges. And towards the conclusion, you can either suggest a way forward, or you can also mention about some of the steps taken by India. Okay. So let us look at the answer. So here the introduction would be something like that. Simply the statement itself that China's huge investments in Pakistan and Pakistan's inability to provide security to them has led to Chinese demand for security outpost in Pakistan as well as in Afghanistan. A very simple introduction. Please do not go for, and even for the mains students, those who are giving mains this time, at the most introduction is going to fetch you half or 1 mark. But if you spend too much time on the introduction, naturally you are going to run short on time that can be utilized for writing the body of the answer, which gives you maximum marks. So if you just cannot think of any introduction, just write any introduction in very simple terms. A very simple introduction can be: China has demanded a military outpost in Pakistan as well as in Afghanistan. A very simple introduction. Do not spend too much time, not only for GS 1, 2, 3, but also for ethics. And with respect to optional, at times introduction becomes very important. So in case any of you facing problem, you can definitely reach out to me on the Telegram group. And yes, this PDF has been uploaded on the Telegram group, that is what is, sorry, all smalls IR this week. This is the Telegram group, and this PDF has been uploaded over there because this was a demand from the students. So you can download it and you can use it for, I mean, referring to it just now, and please take down the notes, okay, whatever I am suggesting you. So first heading, as I suggested, expanding profile. What is that expanding profile? We know that China is the second largest economy, so naturally its economic profile has increased. Then it has got some of the strategic key bases, key ports, strategically important ports, so naturally its geopolitical profile has increased, its trade relations has increased, its need for stabilizing Xinjiang and its near periphery, that is another important area. So that is why China wants a say in the security not only in Pakistan and Afghanistan but also in Central Asia, because Central Asia is adjacent to China. So naturally, if there is any sort of tension in Central Asia, it can spill over to the restive regions of China. Xinjiang, you can look at the map, it just borders Central Asia. Moreover, Xinjiang is a restive region, including Tibet is also a restive region. So due to all these factors, China's profile is expanding. So what are the points that I have given you? China's emergence as a key global power, you can mention, second largest economy. Its area of interest has increased. How? Through trade linkages, coast of Africa up to Indian Ocean, and then it has acquired some of the strategic ports, Hambantota, Gwadar, and then in Djibouti. And there is a huge Chinese investment in Pakistan and attempt to bypass Malacca dilemma through China-Pakistan economic corridor. I have already discussed this. And then it has got geopolitical ambitions. What are its geopolitical ambitions? The first is to become the preeminent power by passing USA. Another is to ensure a unipolar Asia. So that is why all these designs that you are seeing containing India in the Indian Ocean region. So if China succeeds in containing India in the Indian Ocean region, naturally there is no other challenger for China. Japan cannot be a challenger, Australia cannot be a challenger, and other West Asian nations, they can never be a challenger. So India is the only challenger. So if it succeeds in boxing India in the Indian Ocean region in the South Asian geography, naturally China can ensure a unipolar Asia. And a unipolar Asia means in future unipolar world, because Asia has become the center of geopolitics by virtue of its rapid economic rise, its demographic profile, and its increasing tech competitiveness. Okay, so those are some of the points given. Compete with USA and ultimately replace USA as the preeminent power, become a dominant geopolitical actor, and expanding its area of influence, Pacific, Persian Gulf and beyond. And what are the challenges that it creates for India? One is unipolar Asia, that will be a challenge. You will have, please explain these points, okay? I have just given you keywords. And then challenging India as a net, we are a net security provider, we claim to be one. But if China presents itself along our borders in the Indian Ocean region, naturally that will challenge India's claim as a net security provider in the region. And the third is two-front threat across northern and western borders, China on the north and Chinese outpost in the Pakistan, which means China on the western front as well. So a two-front threat for India. Okay, then you can also mention about Indian Ocean region, China challenging India's primacy in the Indian Ocean region. That can be another point. Okay, so the answers have been discussed. So let us look at some of the important news this week. A lot happened. Okay, in fact, Mikhail Gorbachev, he passed away. I don't think I have mentioned it. No, I have mentioned it. Okay. So the first one, US wants India to join coalition on price cap on Russian fuel. Presently, G7 has agreed to put a price cap, but the agreement is not about what that cap should be. And in retaliation, Russia has said that I am going to respond very strongly against this to whichever nation that agrees to this price cap. And Nord Stream 1 that supplies energy to Germany, it comes through the Baltic Sea. And initially, for maintenance work, its flow had been reduced just for 3 days. But then Russia has expanded, Gazprom has expanded indefinitely. It has said that the problem continues. So that is a pressure tactics on Germany. And moreover, just look at the scenario. USA is energy sufficient. All these European nations, they are not. Moreover, winters are approaching and these nations, they need to stock up fuel for the winters. There is very high inflation across Europe and in USA. And moreover, it is Russia who is providing subsidized fuel. So you are asking to put a price cap on a nation that is providing subsidized fuel, while no such price cap on Saudi, UAE or any other nation. You have not permitted Iranian oil to come to the market. There were talks around permitting Venezuela oil to the market just to ease the liquidity crunch. And through this, what West wants to do is two things. One is weaken financing of Ukraine crisis, and the second is to cool down energy prices. These are the two targets of West, that through by putting a cap on Russian fuel, they will be weakening Russian financing of its war, because ultimately it is the energy. And moreover, as the war started, energy prices spiked up, and energy is the key export of Russia. So indirectly, it is through energy that this war is being financed, this crisis is being financed. So these are the two goals. However, it just seems unbelievable that how delusional they can be, and they did ask India. However, we already know that India won't be joining any such coalition, because ultimately we also have to look at our own national interest. And if Russia is providing cheaper oil to us, why there should be a further pricing cap while there is no cap on any other nation's oil? And moreover, the West said nothing when Gulf countries were putting ASEAN premium. You all must have read about this, that whatever oil was being supplied to Asian nations by the Gulf, Asian nations had to pay an additional price in the name of ASEAN premium. So when West gets cheaper oil and Asia is discriminated against, absolutely no questions. But today when Asia is getting cheaper oil, you have a problem and you want to further put a cap on it. So this is how geopolitics runs, and please do not bring that argument to me that sir this is war and war is very bad, etc., etc., etc. It's all about national interest. You must have heard the external affairs minister speaking that from wherever I will get cheaper oil, I will be procuring from there, because our per capita income is just around $2,000. We are not a very rich nation, we are a poor nation, and moreover we are at the time of economic recovery. Okay, so I don't think there are too many questions. In case there are any questions, please keep asking them. Okay, so next is, one third of Pakistan is flooded and debate around food imports from India. Suppose there is a question, then yes, on the humanitarian ground, and then should trade be opened? Ultimately it is Pakistan who has blocked the trade, so the onus lies on Pakistan, and moreover it is Pakistan who is at loss. And just look at the tomfoolery, how politics trumps common sense. You can get something basics like onions are there, potatoes are there, tomatoes are there from your neighbor, but just because of politics and because of domestic criticism, your plan is to procure all of them from UAE. But UAE is a desert, how it can grow vegetables? So the same vegetables will be exported from India to UAE and then from UAE to Pakistan. So imagine this logistics cost, time overrun. You can get harvest the same day or at the max the very next day from your neighbor, but because of politics and to shield away from domestic criticism, you are willing to go for this India to UAE and UAE to Pakistan. So this is a classical example of how politics should not be done. And during Bill Clinton campaign, there was a very famous term, and you can search it on internet. It is the economy stupid. That is a very famous term that was used during Bill Clinton's regime. Sorry, not regime, but during his presidential campaign. So ultimately it is the economy. Today we are in a comfortable position. Why? Because we are economically strong and we have hedged all our options. We have diversified our energy resources. We have a very comfortable forex reserve. We have diversified our economy. So all those nations that did not go for diversification, look at Pakistan, look at Sri Lanka, even you can look at Nepal, they are suffering. Third is, and yeah, this one is important. You must have heard about, in the last week only I did explain about Yuan Wong 5, a satellite tracking ship from China, and it docked on Hambantota, and then after 6 days it went back. And the news is that it did not go back to China through Strait of Malacca route, but it is somewhere else. And for that I just want to show you. Oh yeah, I think I have stressed it too much, but still I think this should be sufficient. Yes, so just imagine the map, okay, or you can even look at the PDF. So somewhere around this is Sri Lanka. It's either V or W. So which the traditional shipping route for Sri Lanka is through this Strait of Malacca, and then from here it can go up to China. And this South China Sea, by acquiring some of the key islands, China has ensured a very strong presence in the region. But this is a choke point, right? And India has got a deep water port of Sabang in Indonesia. And here we know that it is Andaman and Nicobar Islands, which is a tri-services command. So in case of trouble, India will always be in a very comfortable position to choke this key trade route, and that will be very much troubling for Chinese economy. So as a solution to this, initially they tried to do this through Kra Canal. They tried to build it in Thailand. They could not, because there was resistance from Thailand. Then through CPEC, we also know CPEC, it has got environmental challenges, it has got security challenges, and it has got other technological challenges. Then what are the other routes? This is Sunda Strait, but even this comes under India's area of influence, and even this Lombok Strait. All these three straits, they are closer to Andaman and Nicobar Islands, and they are within India's sphere of influence. So what Chinese ship is doing is it is trying to find an alternate route, and that alternate route is through Mumbai Vettar Strait. And this one is between East Timor. You see, you can look at this East Timor, and this one is Indonesia. So China is perhaps, again this is perhaps, this is not a confirmation, but this is being thought of that the ship has gone for mapping all this region so that China can find some of the alternate routes so as to avoid its blocking. Because suppose there is some crisis and there was need for block, initially you would block this, then this route opens, you will block this, then this route opens, you will block this. Still there will be an alternate route available. And link this with Chinese involvement in South Pacific. We know that China has signed a security pact with Solomon Islands. So link this, that the purpose of security pact can be not only to have its own influence in the southern Pacific, but also to protect its own sea routes, its sea trade. And then because of this concern and increasing Chinese influence in the region, Papua New Guinea, it has called for renewing its, signing a security pact with Australia and probably New Zealand too. Presently, they have very deep security cooperation, but it has not been signed. That is just a verbal pact. But now they want it documented. So in South Pacific, some very important geopolitical activities are going on. China wants to expand its influence, it wants to protect its seabound trade, it wants to avoid all their choke points. And another aspect, link it with Taiwan. Okay, suppose in a scenario where China goes for invasion of Taiwan, naturally it will have to continue with its trade, and Chinese trade will have to come through this route, right? So if Chinese ships are harassed or all these trade routes are blocked, China will not be in a position to sustain holding on to Taiwan. US will be there, Germany will be there, Japan will be there, France will be there. In fact, Australia will be there. And Chinese Navy cannot take on all these navies. So you can link this with Taiwan as well, that in case China goes for any such misadventure and there are chances of its trade routes getting blocked, then China is searching for some of the alternate trade routes so that it can continue to have its trade. So you need to look at this in this complete picture. Okay, so this is how you look at what is happening geopolitically. Nothing happens in isolation and nothing happens because just it had to happen. There is a reason behind everything. If China is doing something, why is it doing? So I hope you must have understood this. Please, this is very important. And yes, from prelims point of view as well, please remember all these traits. From Malacca to Sunda to Lombok to Ombai, or in fact there can be question with respect to these islands. So please remember them, in fact even for your prelims examination. Okay, so any doubt related to this? No, there aren't any doubts. Okay, so let us go to the next piece of news. Indonesian Parliament approves membership of RCEP. RCEP has already been activated, and we will be discussing RCEP in detail. When the student asked me on this under the comment that sir, please discuss all these three topics, I was thinking that if there is some news related to this, but when I found this news, Indonesia has ratified, then Malaysia has also ratified, Australia has ratified, China has ratified, South Korea, a whole set of nations they have ratified RCEP, and its importance we will be looking in the coming slides. We must be knowing about the watchdog drills, right? India has sent its army. China is also there, and other set of nations that I have already discussed it. But the news is that India will stay away from Navy drills. Why? Because those drills will be taking place in Western Pacific, around the areas, around the maritime region where Russia and Japan have some conflicting claims. So, looking at the sensitivities of Japan, India has said that it will be participating in the army drills, but it will not be participating in navy drills. So this is how you balance the relationship. So you can give this one as an example of India's that nimble balancing, that by participating in Vostok, India strengthened its relationship, and India reaffirmed its commitment towards Russia and Russian friendship. But at the same time, India denied its participation in the navy drills so as to respect Japan's sensitivities, and it does not want to become a point of contention between Russia and Japan. Okay, So this is how you can use this point in any of the questions, suppose related to, suppose question comes about India's balancing its relationship, India-Japan relationship, or India-Russia relationship. You can use these points in all these three type of questions in different formats. Okay. So next is G20 Environment and Climate Ministerial Meet in Bali that has taken place, and what is that environment minister said? I have written that down in the slide. Okay. With respect to this, you need to remember what he said, and what he has said is nothing new. That is same old, that you are not financing, you need to provide technology and capital so as to achieve the target and all. But yes, do remember India's Paris climate goals and our Glasgow commitments. Okay, these two are important with respect to climate change. Next is, and this is a very big news, this is very courageous of UNHRC, that finally they went to Xinjiang. Michael Bachelet, I cannot pronounce her name exactly, Bachelet, and she was retiring on 31st, and she had said that before my retirement I shall be releasing the report, and just I think 3 to 4 hours before her retirement the report was released. And this is for the first time that any authentic UN report has come with respect to Xinjiang. So you can use this example about role of UN, that UNHRC gave its report on Xinjiang that was against a P5 nation. So this shows the relevance. But again, you can also use this point in criticism of UN, that despite having a damning report against China about its treatment of Uyghurs, UN has not been able to take any concrete action against China or force China to, end all these atrocities. Okay, so you use same points in different manner. It's not about how much knowledge you have, but rather it is about how well you can articulate whatever you know, whatever limited you are knowing. Okay, so this is how, that is what I'm trying to explain you, that is what I'm trying to suggest you. Mikhail Gorbachev passes away. Naturally, I would not have gone into Cold War because that is too big a topic to be discussed in 2 hours. However, do remember Glasnost, Perestroika, how he tried to reform the economy as well as polity, but ultimately that led to demise of USSR. Okay, so India-Bangladesh water sharing agreement, and yes, regarding UNHRC report, I think I have a slide related to that. Yes, this one was G20 Environmental Climate Ministerial Meet in Bali. What were the important key points? India is showing intent as a problem solver despite not being a traditional contributor. We have always said that we want to be a part of solution rather than a problem, and this you can use as India's leadership. If you talk about India's claim to UNSC permanent membership, or India's increasing profile, or India's leadership globally, you can bring this one as well, that on climate change, despite not being a traditional contributor to the emissions, India is a part of solution, and India's targets are among most ambitious. Okay, next, climate finance from developed countries remains a mirage. You must have heard about GCF, Green Climate Fund. The target was that from 2020, developed nations, they will be providing $100 billion per year for prevention as well as mitigation activities to the developing nations. However, even till 2022, first tranche of $100 billion that has not been provided. So that is the data associated with it. It remains a mirage and it does not match global aspirations. And then primary responsibility towards net zero emission rests with the developed countries. So ultimately it is the developed countries who have to go towards net zero emission because they have been the historical polluters. Moreover, they are developed and they are technologically more capable. So the point is that towards net zero it is their responsibility, and developing nations, they are yet to develop. They have to invest a lot towards infrastructure, towards social sector schemes. So naturally, and moreover technologically also, they are not that much capable. So ultimately it is the developed nations who should provide both finance as well as technology so as to tackle climate change. And this one is the most important line, that there is a need for scaling up climate finance to double 2019 levels by 2025. That by 2025 we need to double the climate finances what we had at 2019. This has been India's demand. You can also bring in the what Prime Minister had said at Glasgow, that contribute 1% of your GDP. This was to the developed nations. Contribute 1% of your GDP towards tackling climate change by providing support to the developing nations. These are some of the factual information you can always bring in. Next, we will be looking at the Xinjiang report. Yeah, UN report on Xinjiang. So what has happened is that in case of Xinjiang, let me just give you a brief. Any questions? No questions. Okay. So let me just give you a brief. The point is that Xinjiang is a restive region. Mostly they are people of Turkish origin. Okay. And there was a group called as ETIM, East Turkestan Islamic Movement, and they tried to go for some violent activities, some terror attacks against the Chinese infrastructure and Chinese government, Chinese people in the region. Initially, China did try to handle it, they could not. And moreover, always remember that CPEC comes through Xinjiang only. So what China did is what it does the best. It simply put all these people in internment camps, which it calls as re-education camps, training camps. Then mosques, they were demolished, and in place of many mosques, even toilets were built. And this report has interviewed some of the people who have faced harassment, and they said that in fact there was a demand, or there were people who would be looking at us so that we are not praying. So even praying Islamic, I mean offering namaz, that was even prohibited. Then many males, they had to undergo castration so that they cannot produce further children. Same happened with many of the women, and all this is documented, and China terms them as anti-terrorism and anti-extremism policies. China's target is Sinicization of Islam, means Islam but of a Chinese model. It wants Sinicization of Tibet, Sinicization of Inner Mongolia. So all these regions should have one dominant identity, that is Chinese identity. Because China knows that if people have different identities, naturally going forward they may start asserting their identities, and this might undermine the primacy of Chinese Communist Party. And that is the biggest threat of China. And just you must know that China's main boundary is just across that Great Wall of China, where Han Chinese beyond which used to stay. But all those regions, Mongols and all, then Tibetan Buddhism, that it the region belongs to all these ethnic groups. But China's target is to have one common identity. And for that, and with respect to Tibetans, Chinese treatment is not this much harsh. But here China is extremely harsh, and that has been termed as crime against humanity. And this is a very serious charge. So that is some of the basic information that I have mentioned it. That extent of arbitrary and discriminatory detentions, predominantly of Muslim groups, may constitute international crimes, in particular crimes against humanity. Then there were, it is Human Rights Watch and other human rights groups, in fact Amnesty International also, then Japan was there, Germany was there, which come more prominently to support this report. And in fact Human Rights Watch, I think I have written, yes, Human Rights Watch has said that this is solid foundation for UN action to establish accountability for the abuses, and they have called for investigation. But as usual, China has said that these are false information, and they have released a 122-page rebuttal, and this rebuttal is also on the UN site, UN website, just besides the UNHRC report with respect to Xinjiang. And here there is something very important that I would like to draw your attention towards. That there is one nation, yes, Germany. You know, Germany has been a nation that is militarily not that much strong, but its main focus is on trade. And so it has generally not been in favor of trade restrictions or trade sanctions, be it against Russia or China. But when we see that here Germany comes forward to welcome the report, and moreover, mind you, just few days back, German ambassador to India had termed Chinese claim on Arunachal Pradesh as outrageous. And moreover, Germany is also looking at navigations and patrols in the Indo-Pacific region. It is trying to strengthen its presence. So if a question is with respect to European Union comes, India-EU relations, because India-Germany relations, there is very little chance that there can be a question on India-Germany relations. So here you can mention this as point of convergence against China, be it on Chinese human rights records or China's outrageous territorial claims. Okay. So that was with respect to UN report on Xinjiang, and I have suggested that where you can mention all these points. Then anything more? India-Bangladesh water sharing agreement, and yes, after that I'll go to the next part. And this one is the news. As I suggested that China is searching for alternate route, and I talked about this one, Solomon Islands. that Papua New Guinea, it wants to negotiate a new security treaty with Australia and probably New Zealand too. The purpose is to formalize security cooperation because China has become a clear and present threat to the stability in the Southern Pacific. With Solomon Island, we saw what has happened. So same remains the threat with respect to Papua New Guinea because it is also a small island. And moreover, what has happened in the Southern Pacific is that traditionally US is not very much involved. USA had given its diplomatic as well as security interests to Australia because Australia is also a treaty ally of USA. But then Australia has had a very significant trade dependence with respect to China. So naturally, Australia would keep a blind eye towards all these Chinese designs. But when this Solomon Islands incident happened, that has made USA more interested towards South Pacific, and USA wants to assert its presence, its dominance in South Pacific. And the region is also under to a certain extent instability. So that is why a small island, Papua New Guinea, it wants a new security treaty with Australia. So if a question is with respect to South Pacific comes, you can bring in the points of Chinese alternate sea routes, Solomon Islands and its security pact, and Papua New Guinea demands for a new security treaty. And there is not much challenge to this treaty because anyway they have got very deeper security cooperation. Okay. So that is why this will be signed quite efficiently. And now first let's look at India-Bangladesh water sharing agreement. There are some very brief point and then we will go back to all the topics of the day. Yes. So you see, in India-Bangladesh water sharing agreement or India-Bangladesh relations, water has been the most contentious issue because Bangladesh itself, it is part of a riverine delta and it is also an agrarian economy. And Tista river has been a sticking point because on Tista roughly 70% of, even more than 70% of Bangladesh population is associated in one way or the other. And with the help of Tista, Bangladesh could grow 3 seasons rice. But because of climate change and then building of dams, the situation was such that water flow got restricted. Initially, there was no agreement. Then around 1984, there was an agreement. Sorry, in 1983, the agreement was 39% to India and 36% to Bangladesh. But this agreement was only for 2 years. After that, what happened? When Ganga Treaty was signed, the demand was renewed. But with respect to India, the problem is that this river comes from Sikkim and mainly northern Bangladesh region. If we start sharing water of Tista, almost whole of northern West Bengal, that will run dry. And as a result, West Bengal Chief Minister, she has not agreed to it. And moreover, the issue is not with respect to monsoon times because there is enough water for both India and Bangladesh, but it is during the lean phase from September to June when flow dries up, that creates a challenge because at that time roughly the river becomes almost dry. and Bangladesh has got its own agricultural challenges, its own food security challenge. So this has been a persistent demand, and this matter is politicized. So as a solution, Bangladesh Chief Minister, she had suggested that we can share rivers like Tursa, Jaldhaka and Radak rivers for agriculture as well as drinking water. And that is something that has happened in recent times. That focus has shifted away from Tista, because anyway Tista does not have sufficient water. And moreover, the problem is that there are barrages and very small dams on Tista where too much water cannot be stored. So if big dams could be built, water could be stored during the rainy season, and slowly it could be released during lean patch, and that would have addressed the demands of both India as well as Bangladesh. But the problem is that due to melting of glaciers and impact on the monsoon, ultimately the overall rainfall and overall the flow of the river, that has reduced. That is the first thing. And the second problem is that we are talking about Himalayas, which is tectonically unstable. So building any dam in that region, that would be very much difficult. And if we build a dam further downstream, the upstream states like Sikkim and northern West Bengal, they won't be getting benefit out of it. So ultimately we would be building dam in our region just for the help of Bangladesh. So these are some of the challenges with respect to it. And Bangladesh Chief Minister, sorry, West Bengal Chief Minister, she did suggest that rather than, since there is no water in Tista, let us go for cooperation on Torsa, Jaldhaka and Radak rivers. And out of those 54 transboundary rivers, another is Kushiara river and then Feni river. Agreement text, that is text of the MOU that has been finalized on interim water sharing on Kushiara river as well as Feni rivers. And this joint river commission, that meeting has held for after 12 years, and previously there were 7 and now 8 more. It means total there will be 15 rivers for water exchange. So if you have, sorry, data exchange. So if you have 15 rivers for data exchange, naturally you will be in a position to assess that what is the overall water flow and how we can go for sharing the water so that Bangladesh water needs can also be addressed. So in case of India-Bangladesh relations, point of contention or issues with relationship, you can always mention that Tista, water sharing of Tista remains unresolved, but in the positive you would mention about MOU about interim water sharing on Kushiara as well as Feni rivers. So this shows cooperation on water sharing and India being sensitive to Bangladesh water demands. Okay. So Tista would be as a negative, as a challenge, and this one, this MOU and meeting of JRC, that will be positive. Okay. And this is some of the factual information, that 14% of total cropped area and 73% of Bangladesh population, and these are some of the districts which are dependent on Tista, and that is why West Bengal government is not willing to share the water of Tista, and she simply says that where is water in Tista, and which is a fact. So rather than Tista there are 53 more rivers we can go for sharing on them, and that is what is happening. Okay. Yeah, this one is Rohingya exodus and India-Myanmar relations. You see, we'll be focusing mainly on Rohingya exodus. Okay, so in case of Rohingyas, you see, when we are talking about Rohingyas, the point is that prior to 1950, I mean 1940s and 1950s, when all these nations they were separated, India, then it was East Pakistan, later on it became Bangladesh, and then Myanmar or Burma was separated. All this region that was a common geographical unit. And around 15th century, with coming of Muslims, there was a migration of Muslims to that region. So Rohingyas, they are not someone from what should I say, last 50 or last 70 years, but their stay in that Rakhine province, that is since 15th century, and going forward around 18th century, around 19th century, they continued to move around. Then what happened? Burma was separated. Later on, East Pakistan, and it became Bangladesh. The point is that in in Myanmar, the citizenship is based on ethnicity, and it is not a present case. It is a very, this is something historical. And in 1982, when this Myanmar nationality law came, here lies the root cause of all this issue. The root cause. Because there what they did was, they did not recognize Rohingyas. They recognized them as Bengalis. And if there is a certain ethnic group that you do not recognize that your own population and your citizenship is based on ethnicity, naturally they would not be considered. So Myanmar says that they are Bengali, and Bangladesh says that they are from Myanmar, they are not from our area. So naturally these people they became stateless. In 1990s, when military regime was there, a white card, this used to be issued to them as identity card. But again, this white card, that was not about permanent stay or citizenship, but this was related to temporary residence. Then what happened? In 2014, there was a national census that was backed by UN. Oh, I think I should go back to this page. UN backed census was there. And after that, what happened was that these Buddhist groups they said that we are going to boycott this census if Rohingyas are included. naturally the government would come under pressure and they were not included in the census. And in that census, all these groups, they were identified as Bengalis. So there lies the root. Then what happened in 2015 when Tien Sen government, they also did not recognize, and coming forward even in 2016 when the democratic government came under popular pressure, they also did not recognize this group. So ultimately it is about populist politics. So, and further the challenge was that restriction was not just that you are not a citizen, but this group, Rohingya, this group, it was under constant harassment. It was like even in case of marriage, you have to seek permission. In case of employment, you have to seek permission. And for the identity, you have to get photographs, women without veils and men without beards, which goes against basic Islamic norms or values, whatever you say. So as a result, what happened? A group emerged, ARSA, Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army. Okay, and this group in 2017, I think it is 2017 only. Yes, it is in 2017. Yes, 2017. So this group, Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army, a terrorist group, they attacked Myanmar army and Myanmar police. So naturally there will be a retaliation, and retaliation was very forceful, very brutal. And that retaliation was in the name of tackling terrorism and stabilizing the region. When you will look at uh, suppose Myanmar, this region, that this becomes Rakhine province. So naturally this is Bangladesh and this is India. So naturally they would simply migrate to India, Bangladesh, and they have also migrated to other region. So when this repression came in 2017, that led to their exodus. So the challenge here is that Myanmar does not recognize them as citizens, and they do have a threat of life. So you must have heard about non-refoulement policy, that any government cannot send a refugee back to its original place if he or she faces a threat to life. But we have not signed UN Convention on Refugees. So we argue that we do not have any obligation with respect to them. However, what happens is that they illegally migrate, then they would go to UNHRC in India, and then they will get some cards, identity card, and they would stay in India. And they are not just in Delhi, they are in very sensitive areas like Jammu. They have got their colonies in Jammu. So in a sensitive area, you have got a group of population that is associated with a terror group. Then there is always higher scope of them getting radicalized, being radicalized by other terror groups, ISIS, Lashkar-e-Taiba and others. So this creates a very serious security threat for us. They are in Hyderabad, they are in Delhi, they are in Jammu, they are in different other regions, and naturally if you do not have a clear cut record, so any illegal migrant is a potential security threat. and moreover there have been claims of them being involved, and even this ARSA, they had gone for killing of non-Hindus in this Rakhine area. So that also becomes a very potent challenge. They are not like Tibetans that okay, we are being persecuted in our land and we are peace loving people, let us stay. Media every now and then they would say that there is no claim, there is no report of any FIR or any criminal antecedents. It's not so, because it's not just India, there are other nations as well for whom these groups are potent security threats. And please do not go for Al Jazeera line. They would put blame on India that India should accept all the refugees. Why should India accept it? First is a potent security threat, and apart from that, we are already a huge population, and out of them many are poor, even below poverty line. So our commitment is first towards our citizens rather than opening our doors to everyone. We have already opened doors to a lot many people. There is no need to open that anymore, and India needs to be very much pragmatic on this. But yes, on Rohingya issue, your answer with respect to GS, that is IR, with respect to security, paper 3, and with respect to ethics would be different. In terms of ethics, you would support. Why? Because of ethical, humanities, human values and all. But in case of security, your focus would be more with respect to cross border issues, then human trafficking and all, threat to internal security. And in the with respect to IR, you will be playing Myanmar, Bangladesh, China, India, all these elements. Okay. So that is the brief history of Rohingyas. Let us look at some of the other factors. Under 1982 Myanmar nationality law, they have been denied citizenship, and till date they have not got that citizenship. In India, our clear status is that they are in detention centers, and after the Supreme Court takes a decision on them, because we were about to deport them and roughly 7 to 10 have already been deported. Some people, they went to the Supreme Court and the matter is still pending in the Supreme Court, and our status is that after agreement with the Myanmar government, we will send them back roughly 50,000 as per the government record. Their number is roughly around 50,000, but we do not know what their actual number is. Okay. Since 2017, as I said, action of ARSA, Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army, they killed many of the Myanmar military and Myanmar police. So in retaliation, they came very hard against these people, and they started fleeing. And Myanmar army did that in the name of stability in the country's western region, and that is why I have mentioned here Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army attack on police and military. And UN Human Rights Chief has termed it as textbook example of ethnic cleansing. You can remember all these terms. A textbook example of ethnic cleansing. These are biggest non-state ethnic group in the world, because neither Bangladesh takes them nor Myanmar takes them. And even if Bangladesh has taken them, just look at the smartness of Bangladesh. They have kept them on a faraway island so that they do not become a security threat in Bangladesh, because in Bangladesh itself, radicalization is a very big problem. And if we go for doing something like that, that okay, pick all these 50,000 and put them on some islands in, where should I say, Andaman or in Lakshadweep, all hell will break loose. So this is how we have to understand it. Okay. in 2017 there was an agreement between Bangladesh and Myanmar, and Bangladesh talked about voluntary return of Rohingyas. And why would they return voluntary when they face threat to their life? And Bangladesh cannot send them forcefully, because again that will go against its own domestic constituency, because ultimately it is an Islamic nation, and naturally there will be sympathies with these groups. But Bangladesh knows about the security challenges, the humanitarian aspect of it, the need for resources. And what we have done is that, first of all, we did not take clear cut position and we have ceded space to China. That is point number one. It is China who is negotiating between them. Second, we have provided them with humanitarian assistance. We have sent some of the tents and prefabricated houses and all to Myanmar, and some humanitarian assistance to Bangladesh as well. Because you see, the problem with us is that we want Myanmar to be on our side. Why? Because of tackling radicalization and preventing Chinese overtures in the Bay of Bengal. And if we go for a very strong stance against Myanmar on the basis of its human rights records, democracy and all, naturally it will get closer to China, and that is a very big geopolitical threat to us. And we have seen in the past how because of taking idealistic stance of supporting democracy in Myanmar, that has hampered our geopolitical interest, and that was the reason why Myanmar went closer to China. And moreover, presently when there is a military coup and it is military that is in control, we cannot take a very clear cut position against military. Why? Because we know that military is a clear and present reality in Myanmar. Even while Aung San Suu Kyi's party, NLD, National League for Democracy, was in power, 25% of the seats were reserved for the military backed people. Then internal security, defense, all of them were with military. And you must be remembering Operation Sunrise that we conducted across the border. Why? For tackling insurgency, going after NSC and Khaplang faction. So because of all these factors, we want Myanmar to be on our side. But if we ignore this Rohingya issue, first of all, that is a domestic challenge for us, plus that is a challenge for Bangladesh, and then it may lead to Bangladesh getting more closer to China. And if China comes and sits at Chittagong or even at Mongla port, both of them, they are in Bangladesh, they are in more proximity to us. And Bangladesh has got a very deeper security cooperation with China. Recently, China provided more than $1 billion worth of loan for this canal and irrigation system manufacturing related to Tista River. So this is the geopolitical complexity of this Rohingya issue, that it is a catch-22 situation for us, whom to support, whom not to support. Okay, so presently there are refugees in Bangladesh, Pakistan. These are some of the factual information. And let us look at some of the challenges and some of the suggestions. The first is, as I explained, difficult to choose between Myanmar and Bangladesh. Both are important. Myanmar for us is a land bridge to ASEAN. We have got our connectivity projects, right? In Myanmar, and then with Bangladesh also. Bangladesh becomes all the more important. Why? Because of this porous boundaries, concern regarding radicalization, connectivity towards the northeast, economic development of northeast. then from Myanmar only Asian Trilateral Highway crosses. So because of all these factors, both these nations are very much important and both these nations are at odds with each other. Then, since China is a mediator, that challenges India's regional leadership, that if you cannot take leadership, you cannot take onus to solve the challenges in your own neighborhood, how you can expect how you can be expected to solve challenges somewhere else. And Bangladesh has requested time and again to India that please talk to Myanmar and please handle this scenario. But that is a challenge for us. We cannot just ask Myanmar, because if Myanmar, and look at Myanmar also, if Myanmar agrees for taking back these Rohingyas, its domestic constituency will not agree to it, the Buddhists, they will not agree to it. So naturally, be it the democratic regime or the military regime, it will lose domestic popularity, and presently against the military there is a protest by the democratic supporting activists and people. So if military takes back these Rohingyas, it will be opening another front. So that is a challenge for military as well. And naturally for the democratic regime, we see that Aung San Suu Kyi, who got a Nobel Peace Prize, she was defending Myanmar and Myanmar military again for their action against Rohingyas at the International Court of Justice. She did face a lot of criticism, but ultimately she was doing this as part of her national duty. Okay, so what is the next point? Questions about India's commitment to human rights, because this is a clear-cut case of ethnic cleansing, biggest non-state ethnic groups. So if India does not support these groups and if India does not act against Myanmar, many of the Western governments, they have gone for putting sanctions against Myanmar. So that would challenge India's commitment to human rights. And India has its concerns about instability in the northeast. Any nation, be it Bangladesh or Myanmar, becomes hostile to India, naturally that will be a threat to India's northeast. And moreover, these Rohingyas, they themselves are a threat to our northeast because of their association with the extremist groups, fear of radicalization, getting recruited by the terror elements. Okay, next is security challenges due to illegal migration. Okay, now comes suggestions. So in suggestions, as I have argued time and again, always focus on some of the elements of institutional cooperation, and here BIMSTEC provides us with that opportunity. So using the platform of BIMSTEC, and what we can do in the past we have done and we can continue to do it, is we can continue to provide aid to Bangladesh for accommodating this Rohingya. Then we can go for engaging with ASEAN, because in ASEAN for many of the nations this is a challenge. Many of them are Islamic nations. You can look at Indonesia, Malaysia, Brunei. Engaging with both Myanmar and Bangladesh to arrive at amicable solution, and then engaging with ASEAN. You see, there is no clear-cut solution to this. So naturally, we will have to go for the suggestions. Had there been a solution, the government of India would have arrived at it, because it is a very complex situation. And moreover, presence of China and China as a mediator this makes the situation all the more complicated. Okay, so let us look at the next topic. RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. Any question? No question. Okay, half an hour I don't know whether I'll be able to complete it. So the topic was, so the news was that Indonesia Parliament, they have approved the membership of RCEP. So you see, in case of RCEP, just let us go back to the history. There was an agreement called as Trans-Pacific Partnership (TPP). Here USA was there, Japan was there, Chile, Mexico, Canada, all were there. And this was touted to be the biggest trade agreement. But unfortunately, when Trump regime came, they pulled themselves out. So no more TPP. And when the world's largest economy pulls out, naturally, its overall heft also shrinks. Still, Japan took the leadership and the new grouping called as CPTPP, Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership, came into existence. And at the same time, there was talk about another grouping, that is Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. It had all the 10 ASEAN nations, then India and China, Australia and New Zealand, Japan and South Korea. Negotiation began around 2013 and ultimately in 2020, around September, India pulled the plug that we are no more going to be a part of this. What were the factors and how does that impact India? That we will be looking at in the coming slide. But presently, the fact is that this is the largest economic grouping. Roughly 1/3 of world population, 1/3 of world economy, a quarter of global trade, and 31% of FDI flows. Okay. This is the heft of this grouping. And its target is eventually to eliminate 90% of the trade, and it will set rules around trade, intellectual commerce and competition. Those are some boilerplate. So you see, the purpose was that India was not member of any big economic grouping. India also did not have any FTA with any of the developed nations except for Japan. We do have a FTA with Japan as well as South Korea. So this was an opportunity for India to plug itself into the global supply chain and through that increase its or expand its economy. However, India had certain concerns and India wanted that those of our concerns should be addressed, but unfortunately, those concerns were not addressed. And with all these nations, India suffers a huge trade deficit of more than $100 billion. And in coming times, we will look at it, that how in India-ASEAN relations, initially the FTA was with respect to goods that was implemented. Then in 2015, FTA in services and investment came into being. However, India did not get that market access. ASEAN nations, they did not permit. And that is among the key factors why we see this huge trade gap, huge deficit between India and ASEAN. And India has also asked ASEAN about renegotiation and talks about renegotiating FTA, and India demanding that I should have greater market access. That is about to be, that negotiation is going on. Another aspect is that India already had FTA with South Korea, Japan and 10 ASEAN nations, and we did not have much of the interest with Australia and New Zealand. We can always have separate. So ultimately an FTA with RCEP would have meant FTA with China, and we know that China has not provided us with market access, and there could be sudden surge in imports, and India wanted protection against those imports, that suppose there is sudden surge in imports, I could put restriction or increase import duty. That demand of India was not addressed. Next was with respect to rules of origin. About that also India had its concern, that was also not addressed. Because with China what we have seen is that as our trade with China decreased, our trade with Hong Kong increased in a similar proportion. So there is always a fear that Chinese trade would be rerouted to India through any third nation. And to prevent that, we wanted very strong rules of origin provisions. That was not addressed. Moreover, if you are going for signing FTA with RCEP, that includes Australia and New Zealand, and in dairy product or dairy production, these two nations are the leaders. So the fear was the smaller farmers, smaller dairy farmers, that ultimately will be overwhelmed. The cost of their milk and milk products that will go down, ultimately that will impact their earning. And in a democratic nation, they are a very big vote bank as well. And that is one of the reasons why Australia wants access to Indian market. Recently we did sign the free trade agreement. However, milk or dairy products is not part of that free trade agreement. Okay. So as ultimately this would have been an indirect FTA with China, we were very much concerned about that. And moreover, this was coming in the backdrop of Galwan incident. So naturally there was a concern that you are violating border treaties, and now through this trade agreement you want greater market access. And this 2020 means just after the first wave, and the concept of Atmanirbhar Bharat, that was in vogue. So at one front, if government says that our focus is on Atmanirbhar Bharat, and on the other hand it signs an indirect FTA with China, so this would have shown inconsistency. It had its own set of fears that India would seem to be protectionist, it will impact our actist policy, our bilateral relations with all these RCEP nations. Singapore tried a lot, and then Japan said that India is always welcome, India should come, India should come. And the point is that had we been a part of RCEP, naturally we would have been part of rule framing regime who are framing the initial rules, so our interests could have been protected. Now we are out of it. So there is a very famous saying that if you are not on the table, you are on the menu. So even if India joins now, naturally it would be extremely difficult to amend some of the provisions that are patently against India. So it has also weakened India's overall approach towards the Indo-Pacific. But at the same time, it also did not provide much to the RCEP, because India would have been the third biggest economy and among the biggest market. So, and China has got FTA with ASEAN, Japan, Australia. So ultimately for China, the big prize was India. So even after signing, China could not get much. But yes, in the Indo-Pacific region, it is the leader of an economic grouping setting the norms of trade in the region. And now when we look at Joe Biden administration's IPEF, Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, that can be seen as USA replugging itself into Indo-Pacific Economic Framework from where it had pulled the plug during the Trump regime. Okay. So let us look at reasons for not joining. Inadequate protect against surge of imports. India had said that if there is a surge of imports, I should be able to increase the tariff or put a restriction. That was not addressed. Demand for excluding MFN obligation from investment chapter. This was also not addressed. Lack of clear-cut assurance over market access to nations like China. We know that presently China does not provide market access to us sufficiently. It does provide, but not sufficiently. So this demand was also not addressed. Rules of origin, I already explained it. Then we already had unfavorable balance of trade with ASEAN, Japan and South Korea, and there was a domestic resistance from the MSMEs and dairy sector. So how does this, these were the reasons for not joining, and how does this project present challenges for us, and I have already explained this to you. This may impact India's bilateral relations with RCEP because they may prefer China. Why? Because now their economy is more deeply coupled with Chinese economy. So as a result, it's but natural that China would have greater influence, and that has become the biggest challenge for ASEAN nations. That they want to exploit China economically, but same China is posing a territorial, a strategic and a military threat to all these ASEAN nations. Same China has divided ASEAN into pro-China and anti-China group. Next is, this will allow Beijing to solidify its economic role in the region, because it will be the leader of the grouping that will be setting rules, setting norms through RCEP. India missed out on part of being part of global supply chains, and this also gave impression of India being protectionist. Limits India's scope in the broader Indo-Pacific region and impediment to activist policy. But though RCEP, this was a comparatively older topic, but you can give example that in recent times India has gone for signing FTA with UAE and Australia. With Australia, that was the first developed nations with whom we had an FTA, and we are negotiating FTA with UK and expected that by Diwali it will be signed. Let us see that if with new regime, if in UK, if anything changes. Then with European Union also we are engaged for signing FTA. Okay, so then we are part of I2U2, that is also an economic platform in the this West Asia. So you can present all these examples that India not protectionist, but rather than that India has gone for pragmatic assessment of its interests. And that was one of the key arguments, that we just cannot sign FTAs for the sake of signing it. Our purpose should be to look at the gains that we can have, and through FTA and goods we did not have gain, rather our agricultural sector suffered a lot, because whole this edible oil shifted from soya bean, mustard, groundnut and all to palm oil from Indonesia and Malaysia. Okay, so that is how you would conclude it. India-ASEAN relations, you see, I will be discussing this in next class, because we have got 10 minutes, and in 10 minutes let us this will be insufficient. India-ASEAN relations, that will be insufficient, we will be discussing it later on. Let us go to the next topic, that is Gorkhas in India-Nepal relationship. Okay. Hmm. So you see, with respect to Gorkhas, we had a tripartite agreement between Britain, India, and Nepal. Because these Gorkhas, they go on to serve the British Army as well, and they have been acclaimed for their professionalism and their valor. And for India, we have got Gorkhas as Indian citizens as well as Nepalese citizens. So, in this tripartite agreement, this was signed between Nepal, India, and Britain at the time of independence. And the important point is that in that agreement, it is clearly mentioned that they should be allowed to serve for sufficient time in order to qualify for a pension. Now, what we have done is, through this Agnipath scheme, we have gone for changing our own model of recruitment to the Army, Navy, and Air Force. So, naturally, the way we recruit our soldiers, in a similar way, we shall be recruiting this Gorkhas as well. Gorkhas from Nepal, our Gorkhas as well as those from Nepal. Here, the problem is that only 25% of them will be inducted on a permanent basis, and rest of them, they will have to go back. So this raises a question, why would they come to join the Indian Army? Because in general their first preference would be going to Britain, because the pay, perks, service conditions, they are way better in Britain. Next preference is India, because of family ties, generational ties, as well as payment in India is roughly 2.5 times of what is the payment in Nepalese army. And Nepalese army is in general their third preference. And moreover, through remittances, more than 1,000 crore is sent by Nepalese army person, sorry, yeah, Nepalese citizens serving in Indian army. And this also serves as a ambassador for India's soft power. Because imagine someone who has served in India with Indian army for 20 to 30 years and they go back to their place. They would talk about their treatment, how good India is, their experiences and all. So this would create a soft power. And presently we know that situation is such that there is a section within Nepalese population that is not in favor of India. So in such circumstances, it does, that would have been that is beneficial for us. And moreover, Indian Army chief becomes honorary Nepalese Army chief, and Nepalese Army chief becomes honorary Indian Army chief. This has been a traditional understanding, mutual respect for each other, armies, and fraternal ties between the two armies. And that is why even when there were tensions during that blockade, the relations between Indian and Nepalese army, they were very much cordial. And now look at it. Since this agreement was tripartite, any challenge, any change to this agreement should have been after informing the Nepalese side, the Nepalese government. However, the government of India did not do it. So this has not been taken very well by the Nepalese government. That is point number one. Point number two. Suppose the government of India says that okay, for Nepalese population or Nepalese Gorkhas, we are going to go with previous arrangement because of international obligations. There will be a lot of noise within the nation, and we saw how people, the students, they went on rampage after declaration of this Agnipath scheme. So the Gorkhas in India, they will start raising questions that if Nepalese Gorkhas can be inducted on a permanent basis, why we shouldn't be inducted? Are we less capable than them? The answer is no. And if Indian Gorkhas are inducted on a permanent basis in the army, rest of Indian citizens, they will start questioning that why this special treatment to Gorkhas, why not to us too? So this whole idea of military reform, that will go back to square one, and that is the biggest challenge at present, because we do not want to lose that ties that we have with Nepalese population. And the prime minister, during his first visit to Nepal during 2014, he had specially held the role of Gorkhas, Nepalese Gorkhas, in protection of Indian borders. So that has presented a significant challenge. So that is all is written over here. There are 43 Gorkha regiments, and in 7 Gorkha regiments, these are the regiments where Indian as well as Nepali Gorkhas both are inducted. Roughly 32 to 35,000 soldiers, they are serving in Indian army, and ex-serviceman community is roughly around 1.23 lakh strong. So this is a huge constituency. India should try to cultivate this, and not just that. Roughly 7 to 8 million people from Nepal, they come to work in India. So just the basics like cheaper call rates from India to Nepal, or improving the conditions at the borders, border migration and all. So that will go a long way in improving India-Nepal ties. We know that presently the ties are not in very good phase. First, because of China. Second, because of Nepal's internal politics. Third, because of unnecessary that increasing their claim with respect to the boundary issue. There was blockade, and even within Nepal there are always talks about that sovereignty and all. However, in recent times, with respect to some of the hydropower projects, they have seen the futility of depending on China, and they have given back to us, and that will be done by SJVN. And all this we will be discussing if and when we discuss broader India-Nepal relations. So let us look at the issue. Under Agnipath scheme, only 25% would be selected for permanent recruitment. However, the treaty says that they must go for a pension. So only 1/4 they will be eligible for pension. So why should the rest? They should go for it. It would be better that they either go for British Army or in fact Nepalese Army. At least they will have a permanent job, and we know that there is a huge employment problem in Nepal. Next, as a result, just for 4 years, that goes against the agreement already explained, and Nepal has raised objections to unilateral change. So at least you should have informed, you should have taken the opinion of the concerned stakeholders, but India went for an unilateral change, and that has not been taken well by Nepal, and they have said that let us put a halt. And recently the Indian Army chief, he is expected to visit Nepal, and perhaps some sort of solution can be arrived during his visit. And this a section anti-India sentiment, And this issue, this provides a new opportunity because they simply claim that India does not respect our sovereignty. So that is why it did change, but as per the agreement, it did not inform us, it did not consult with us. And we know that Nepalese nationalist sentiments, that is very strong. Another is Nepal in itself, there is a huge unemployment problem and remittances, that is roughly around 1000 crore. So these are some of the challenge with respect to Gorkha issue in India-Nepal relations. And let us see when the army chief goes, or if there is some sort of solution to this complicated issue, because India would not want to let go of this legacy of Nepalese Gorkhas serving in Indian army, because that not only strengthens our army, but it also provides a very strong linkage between India and Nepal. Imagine more than 1 lakh people getting their pensions from India, 35 to 40,000 already serving in India. So any time, whenever suppose there are some sort of tensions, you would know that there is a constituency that can be cultivated and that will be beneficial to us, that will be helpful for us, that will understand our point of view, our concerns and all. Okay, so that is all India ASEAN that we will be discussing, not necessarily in the next class, but in coming classes we will be discussing. And yes, I remember that Israel Palestine issue also, that needs to be discussed. Okay, but the point is there are so many topics and it's just a 2-hour class, so naturally I have to climb up things, and I did not want that you people should miss on the important events of the week, because that current affairs news, that is very important, and you can note down that in what sort of questions those points can be used as answer. Okay, so let us look at the question for this week. Question is with respect to ASEAN. Please try it. I think sufficient information is already there in the PDF. Please go through the PDF. I'll try to take up, but I cannot promise that in next class India ASEAN will be discussed. That can only be decided based on what are the important events of this week. But yes, please keep suggesting the topics. I will remember them, and whenever I get sufficient time, suppose in next class there are only 2 topics to be discussed, the third one would be India ASEAN, so that in 1 hour that can be completed. Okay, so key areas of convergence and divergence. So introduction, areas of convergence, areas of divergence. How can defense cooperation play a key role in this strengthening this partnership? Regarding defense cooperation, you must be knowing about Cell of BrahMos, Cell of Akash, then Sabang port in Indonesia, Chenji base, access to Chenji base in Singapore and all. Okay, and then Rohingya crisis provides an opportunity for India to revitalize BIMSTEC. In introduction, give a brief around what is this. You can either introduce with what is BIMSTEC, or you can introduce with Rohingya crisis between Bangladesh and Myanmar, and that has created challenges for India. How does this provide an opportunity? Opportunity 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And what are the challenges? Challenges 1, 2, 3, 4, and suggest a way forward. Way forward 1, 2, 3, 4, and a simple conclusion. Okay. So that's all for the class from today. Thank you very much. And please practice these questions that I say it again and again and again. Please practice these questions. You never know which question you are going to get in the mains. Okay, and regarding pre also, whatever the suggestions, please look into them. Okay, thank you very much. That's all for today.